This week on Black Guys and White Movies, we're talking 2000, the year 2000's
Yeah.
movie Gladiator. The movie Gladiator from the year 2000. Let me say that right. I don't know if that even said that right, but the 2000 not having anything else feels weird.
It is a little weird, right?
Yeah,
It is a little weird, just 2000 by itself. But yeah,
man,
20,
this movie,
24-year-old movie.
24-year-old movie that was inspired by a novel that was 42 years older than that from 1958.
Mm,
Did you
mm.
know this? I did not know this.
I did not know this. I know there's a movie from like 1962 called The Fall of the Roman Empire, which Gladiator is basically a remake of, but I did not realize that Gladiator itself was based on something other than that movie.
This is about by Daniel Mannix. A little history for the movie, real movie, the real movie buffs. And he also wrote The Fox and the Hound,
Word.
which became a Disney animated movie.
Wow.
But he has a big IMDb, so he was a notable writer, and he wrote this book, Those About to Die, which inspired the film, and maybe this other. What was the project you mentioned?
Um, The Fall of the Roman Empire is the name of the
Fall of the
movie.
Roman Empire. So before we get into this movie specifically, we'll do our general thoughts, and then we'll kind of break down some things and look
Mhm.
at the whiteness of this movie.
It's pretty
It's a
white,
very
yeah.
it's pretty white, which is interesting. And we'll talk about America's claim on world history
Yeah, for sure. I'm very
and how
interested
we
in
just
that.
how we just like because I was thinking, I was like, if you go to Korean cinema, they're not like, here's our story about George Washington and
Right?
Sacagawea and all these American history lessons. No,
Right,
nobody
starring
else.
Korean actors.
So all starring Korean actors. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
nobody else is just like, this thing happened in the world. We'll tell that story. Nowhere near
Hmm.
us. We got it.
Yeah.
It's funny that America continues to do that, um, while trying to deny its cultural diversity at the same time,
Yeah.
which
And I
is
think
not
that,
new. We were definitely doing that in 2002. I mean, in 2000 as well. And of course, we do it now, maybe even more divisive now.
yeah, I was gonna say this. I mean, this movie is definitely that, right? There's a certain denial of history. Um, Aaron, Roman history is my topic of choice, kind of what I
Well,
went to school
that's what I
for.
wanted to get into.
So,
That's what I wanted to start
yeah,
with,
yeah,
to let
yeah,
people know that, like, okay, this is a Roman history story,
yeah.
and Bernard is a Roman history major,
Roman history major for sure, and from that, just kind of a serious amateur hobby,
a
I guess I would
lifelong
call it.
obsession.
Yeah, for sure, definitely, absolutely. I'm the
Which
type of person who like reads the academic books that professors write for other professors, but yet I have a regular job.
so what? I've been gifted a couple Roman history books by you
So by me, yeah, for sure.
over the years, and so before we get into this movie, let's talk about that just briefly.
Hmm.
Understanding why. Do you? Where does that come from for you?
Sure. I've thought about this a lot over the years. I definitely think I can't trace it back to this movie necessarily, but 2000, I would have been in high school, and it came out at the time when I was just starting to really realize, like, I'm into this thing. So I can't say
Mm,
that this movie wasn't a part of that, but it wasn't the
sure,
source of it. Um, you know, I can't say that my family was overly religious, but I definitely grew up in the Catholic Church, and I think you know, that was always the story in the Bible of like Jesus and the Romans and blah blah blah, and understanding that that was taking place during the Roman Empire. That was always very interesting to me.
sure.
Obviously, you get a lot of the mythology, especially in like a middle school time period from like Greeks and Romans, and like as I started to learn more, like, hey, these just aren't fancy stories. These were people just like you and me who lived a
Sure.
completely different life with a different culture.
Right.
I just found it more and more interesting, especially. like as I got older and considered like how much of those cultural things still exist. Like even in America, we have a Senate that George Washington, to your earlier point, like those founding fathers were very much imitating Rome when they named our house of our legislative body the Senate, and
Right.
you can see
That
all
was the
those like
history they knew.
that was the history they knew, and
But
it would.
there weren't a billion books back then. They only had a few, and it was like ancient Rome. That's what we got. That's what we
Mhm.
know. We know a few British things, but we don't want to be too British because that's why we're having a revolution.
Right, right, and like it's even really interesting because that time period, right? Let's call it the late 1700s into the 1800s. That
Mm-hmm.
was also really the time period of the birth of archaeology. A lot of this stuff was just
Wow.
being uncovered at the time, right? They had certain books and texts that had been preserved, but there was also more that were being found that entire time. So the reason I bring that up to say is I think in the popular conception, which this movie is absolutely a part of, this is like the stereotypical Hollywood Rome, right?
Right.
And the popular conception is still really kind of mired in these ideas that were written down by white guys from the 17 and 1800s
Yeah.
about a European empire that goes out and conquers the world and ships back slaves and extracts things, and citizens are the white guys and everyone else is a servant. And it's like
Yeah.
some of those things happened, yes, but the cultural context and even like the kind of racial and ethnic ideas of hierarchy either didn't exist or were very, very different.
Yeah. And they
And
were creating, even then,
yeah,
they were creating their fantasy, you know?
yeah, they were relating, they were making Roman history reflect them to say that we are as important as these ancient
Yeah.
Romans that we all think are important.
And as we know, a term like Caesar
Yeah.
still kind of reigns in the minds of like oligarchs and
Hmm.
people that fashion themselves as creating new world orders and things. Like I'm a Caesar, that's still
Hmm.
kind of rings through. What did they say in The Wire? Like your name got to ring out. The name Caesar
Name got
has
to
a
ring out.
title of like total um, authoritarian leadership still rings out.
Absolutely. And I mean, even as little as 100 years ago, you think about World War One, right? Like the Emperor of Germany was the Kaiser, and the Emperor of Russia was the Tsar. Both
Yeah,
of those words come from Caesar. Even when they call Kamala Harris, for example, the borders are, as
yeah,
has been said, that like that's still a cultural touchstone from Rome and from that word Caesar, that name Caesar.
yeah. Um, Super fascinating to break down how this history has remained so relevant. I mean, just recently on Twitter or social media, maybe it was even started on TikTok, but it was like,
Mhm.
ask your boyfriend how often he thinks
Yeah,
about the Roman Empire.
for sure.
And this was definitely a white people dominated trend. Um, but I think that even speaks to like where ancient Roman culture sits in our society and in American society. Of course, you would have been part of this trend also.
Absolutely, and the answer's every day.
Yeah. But I think you're, a unique case in that way. Because a lot of black people were responding like never, and me, I'm like, maybe once a week or so. I don't know, not that often, but I did think about you. I was like, Bernard is like, he's probably at the top of this trend.
For sure, multiple times a day. No, I think it's really interesting, right? Because it's a thing I think that I've heard the response from Black people in the past, which is like basically to not quote, but like to I can't think of the paraphrase. It's like why are you interested in that? Like, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's because often it is equated in our culture to this American and before that British version of colonialism, which absolutely destroyed our ancestors
Yeah,
and everything,
in a lot of ways, it's like know thine enemy kind of thing.
for sure. But I think,
This is how a white majority thinks about things and the context in
mhm,
which they place them and the moves that they make in battle, whatever that battle is, corporate,
mhm,
political,
mhm,
they're drawing from this history. This is what they equate as like an ultimate leader or a real man, even like your
Oh
manhood
yeah,
and your leadership style. They're drawing it from these histories. The same way, for example, like using Black Panther as an example, it's like, oh, he draws
right,
from the Panthers in the spirit realm and your ancestors. We always talk about the ancestors. They
right.
consider this their ancestors, whether they're all from the Caucasus region or not.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we'll talk about it more, but one of the things that I always find fascinating about the difference between the reality of what Roman history was and the popular conception is that um, the Roman Empire um, existed on three continents. It existed on Europe, obviously, North Africa, and Western Asia, so the Middle East and modern day Turkey, right? Um,
The true
and
Caucasus region.
the true Caucasus region. And there was more cities, richer cities, and more ancient culture in North Africa and the Middle East and that Anatolia, Turkey area than there were in the European holdings. So in real life, not only was ancient Rome often calling back to their ancestors as being people from the Middle East or from Turkey, because that's where culture came from and they knew it. But also, in reality, over 50% of the population of the empire would have actually been from North Africa, the Middle East, or Turkey. So you would have been more likely to think to land on an average Roman citizen and have it be a quote unquote non-white person. And that's
So
how we think of it.
are these the descendants of what we think of the ancient Egyptians when we think of when that society was at its peak, kind of?
Well, definitely, I would say like Romans and Greeks, like absolutely 100% knew that Egypt was a culture that was older than them. That learning came from Egypt. Even
Came to that, right?
a few of their gods, right? There's even some thought that the goddess Athena was actually a Greek interpretation of the Egyptian god Neth. Um, but the fact of the matter is, they knew that. They knew that Babylon was an ancient place that had been a great empire thousands of years before. So they were trying to tie themselves in many ways to places that the modern day descendants or those who think that they are look down upon. And I think that's really fascinating.
So Gladiator was the second highest grossing film of 2000.
Yeah,
Do you know what number one was?
2000. No.
Mission Impossible 2.
Yes, Ethan Hunt. My God, the worst one.
The word, yeah, the John Woo one, which is not disrespect to John Woo. I think it
Yeah, no
was just
disrespect, John Wayne.
there's a lot of well, he actually kind of created the franchise though,
Mm-hmm.
because the first one we're not going to get into Mission Impossible too much, and we do franchise talks, and
Yeah,
Gladiator is now a franchise that the second one is coming out, so
sure.
maybe sometime after we see the second one, we'll revisit. But anyway, Mission Impossible 2 set the stage for the franchise. First
Yeah.
one is kind of standalone, and it's a comprehensive, like complete beginning to end film. The second one kind of opens up to like he had a girlfriend, and now we're following
Hmm.
him. So anyway,
Well, before we move
the
on
number
from
one
that,
film of 2000. Go
before we
ahead.
move too far from that, I was just going to say one thing that I noticed while watching this movie is kind of like Mission Impossible, the first one, the 1996 one. This movie is basically just a 90s political thriller.
Uh huh. Go
You know what
on.
I'm saying? I mean, it just is kind of that. It even kind of ends with that, like, the bad general president dies, and suddenly the ship of state rights itself. Like, it's absolutely like a Ridley Scott or Tony Scott movie set in the modern era, just
Well,
with
it is interesting you
fancy
say that
armor.
because what it made me think of is, and this is what we'll really get into or really nail the title of the podcast. It's kind of throughout this movie. It's really interesting, but the noble savage
Mm,
story,
yeah, it's
you know,
definitely there.
which it's definitely a story to placate the masses. I believe
Hmm. Hmm.
your hero is always there, but they're quiet, but they'll save you, and then make room for the next leader. It's not they. If you're really an upright, good man, you'll always fade to the back. You'll never want leadership. You just quietly go about your business.
Yeah, yeah, and I
And
think even. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's how you keep a lot of good men brainwashed in a way, right? By telling the story that this is what it means to be good, is to be quiet.
Mm, hmm.
It's to stay out of the way until the very last minute. But uh usually by that time in the real world, there's no single gladiator fight to,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. And even if you get a chance to take power, you won't take it because you're too noble
Exactly.
to truly lead. You can only lead in moments of extreme distress, and so just wait your time. Wait your time. You upright, upstanding, capable man.
Even the idea that power in and of itself is somehow evil while supporting a system of power. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like it makes no space for the idea that power can be wielded at least better, if not
yeah,
justly, by one of these good men
yeah.
or good
This
people.
movie, this movie is also like peak dad cinema, which
Yeah,
kind of a
absolutely.
newer term, but
My
it's
pops
always
loves
existed.
this.
Dads, especially like the older white men, absolutely love this movie. Like I said, it's a movie that is still talked about a lot today. When people just talk about movies and movie conversation, like, especially if you're talking with white guys 35 and up.
Right.
But you seen Gladiator, but Gladiator, Russell Crowe. But to its point, it won Best Picture and Best Actor. It won 5 Academy Awards. It won 5 Academy Awards.
Really, I didn't know that. I knew it won Best Actor, Best Picture, probably Best Score. I'm guessing.
Best Sound,
Oh, Best Sound.
Best Visual Effects.
And they hold up pretty well.
Yeah, the tigers. I was
The
like, you could tell
tigers
when it
and
was
the
not a real
city.
tiger, but it still looks good though. The city, all the background, the Coliseum,
Yeah, still holds up
best
pretty well.
costume design.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. It was nominated for like 6 other things.
Well, it's
Supporting
funny that
actor,
you talked about it
etc.
being this dad movie because it in and of itself is absolutely a nostalgic film, right? It's calling back on all these like sword and sandal epics from the 50s and the 60s. Like,
Right.
so
Spartacus. This
Spartacus,
is Spartacus again. This is like a
it is
Spartacus remake.
Spartacus. It is the movie The Fall of the Roman Empire. It is all of them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Ben Hur. It's all of
It has been her. They have literally
them.
the carriage race
Hmm.
or fight scene
Chariot.
that's just like a
Yeah.
chariot. Yeah, just like a chariot race. So we're kind of deep in, but I'm gonna give my opinion on the movie.
Yeah. Go for it.
And I was telling you in the text just briefly. I don't think I had ever seen this movie front to end before this,
Mm.
and I thought I had. That was startling for me. I was like, wait, I've never actually seen all of Gladiator. Never sat down and watched it. So in my mind, I was like, Gladiator's all right, but it's not really my thing. And I pretty much still hold true to that because I don't love swords and sandals TV or movie
Yeah.
things. Something about that genre is just not something I can fully get into, and maybe it's just like a suspension of belief kind of thing.
Hmm.
That's difficult for me. Probably a little easier for me to read that than to see it for some reason. The
Mm.
disconnect. But as far as following the story and the themes, I see why people like it. Like I understand it definitely hits hard, and the stakes are. They do a great job of having the stakes high, which I really like because the movie is really just 4 characters. You
Yeah.
know, like
Hmm.
for it to have this epic, it's a historical epic. To have this huge scale, it's really just Ma- uh, uh, Maximus, Commodus, the sister Lucilia, and maybe the kid
Yeah.
who comes in even later in the movie. Those are kind of really the only people that matter. Of course, like shout out to Digimon, the tribesman, who's his buddy,
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
and shout out to the Proximo, right, the older man who
Oh
buys
yeah,
him and kind of like they make a pact together more or
yeah.
less,
Oliver Reed, great final performance.
and the other senator, of course,
Yeah.
who carries out the orders and shows up alongside Commodus, Joaquin Phoenix's character all the time. so these other characters do matter in a sense, but it's really like these four,
Mhm.
and of course the dead wife, which is a whole nother trope with
Huge
white
trope,
movies. There's always a dead
especially
wife.
that era. Especially that era.
Always a dead wife. Men can't fight unless there's a dead wife.
Right.
You're gonna take action. My wife's right there. I'm not gonna take any action.
Right.
And if it's not a wife, it's a mom for sure. Gotta
Definitely.
be a dead woman in somebody's life
Yeah,
to
definitely
do anything.
whatever a prominent female person in your life must be dead in some
Yeah,
way.
yeah. I guess only Superman skirts that.
Kinda. I mean, his
Like
his mom is dead.
the
His biological mom, anyways.
nope, you're right. He does not skirt it. His whole family, his whole he is sent here without a mom. Um, yeah. So so what do you think about this movie as somebody who loves its history?
For sure. So back in the day, I loved this movie. Saw it so many times, like early DVD purchase on my part. Watched it a bunch of times. I watched it so much that I maxed myself out on it.
Sure.
I never stopped liking the movie, but I just could not bring myself to watch it. And there's a number of times over the past, let's say, 15-ish years, where I've literally put the DVD in and it gets to that first scene with his hands going through the wheat, and I'm like, nope, not long enough yet. I just take it out and keep going. It's happened so many times. I still don't know if I would have watched it if not for this what we did. But that said, I still found it enjoyable. I think that Ridley Scott knows how to make a film. At least on the kind of like emotional register part of it, right? The
Uh-huh.
the entertainment level.
Right.
Um, as someone who has over the last 24 years grown even deeper in kind of my knowledge of this era, love of this era, and really understanding the kind of ethnic complexity of it. I do think it falls short. I do think it's absolutely kind of uh, whatever. It's Anglo-American because I think the British matter in this too. They also do that thing where they're like, "Oh yeah, your history is our history all of a sudden, but only
Yeah.
the parts we like." Um, so this Anglo-American thing of like just making the world white, quote unquote. All the Romans have British accents, right?
Right.
And it's funny, like even you were talking about Noble Savage, and I almost thought we were going to get to Jaimin Hansu,
Oh, we
but
we will get to
definitely, okay, okay. I won't get too far into it, but even with Jaimin Hansu and the German dude and um, Maximus's Scottish slave. Like even the white people who are like in servitude are kind of coded ethnic, right?
yeah,
So there's
yeah.
like it's this really strange thing. Um,
Even
so
Oliver Reed, his Proximal,
yeah,
he's like, oh, he's Arab in this movie, basically.
yeah. He's like one of those guys who's like gone native, right? He's been there so long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Um, So I still enjoyed it. I think the costuming and the film sort of stuff in it is really good. But yeah, it's a bummer, and it's a bummer not to see this era because I do love sword and sandal movies. We've talked many times about your difficulty with them, but I still pine for the one that'll at least reflect that era with all of the complexity that it has. It was a nation of multiple areas, multiple ethnicities, multiple languages, multiple religions, just like, let's say, the United States of America or Britain or any of these big countries. And so, walking through its cities, looking, at its economics and cultural whatever, would have been just as complex and varied as our own is. And I don't know. I think those things should be shared. And I'll finish up by saying, even in this Gladiator 2 that's coming out, I won't get too deep. We're not talking about that, so I won't take too much time on it. But the two like emperor villainous characters in that trailer are two Roman emperors named Caracalla and Geta. They were brothers, and they're played by two very, very white actors. But in real life, Caracalla and Geta, their father was North African, their mother was Arab. So like even in this Gladiator 2, we see even more, almost a literal whitewashing of that Roman history, even more
Mhm.
so than in this one. So it really is kind of sad to me that we can't, that we have yet to really get at the complexity of what that world might have looked like.
Yeah, and to put that in the minds of the people that so revere this era.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, you know how you're thinking about it? Let's think
Hmm.
about it like in a realistic term. It was actually super racially and ethnically, religiously complex. And people don't think in history about how hard it is to respect borders.
Yeah, that's a
Everybody
great
didn't
point.
have a map. Everybody didn't have, they weren't airplanes flying around, like keeping an eye. We didn't have, so to be like, oh, they're from here and they're from here. Did they know that?
Right,
If you were 2 miles over the line, did you know you weren't from North Africa, or not that
right.
it's that specific. I'm using a very specific example, but it could have been much, much more blurry. And people were part of tribes and
Hmm.
villages or like small societies more than they were from this country, in a sense how we think
Absolutely.
about it today. It was more like a gang. It's like
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
ventured outside, you had to have something that said you were a part of this and you were protected by it under this flag in a way,
Hmm.
or you were, anything could happen to you. You were a free agent, whatever that
Yeah.
might mean at the time, to be taken somewhere else, or sold into some slavery or captured, or who knows what else they did to people at that time.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought about is even in the very first opening battle of this movie, right? They're fighting these Germanic barbarians, quote unquote, and they're all wearing a bunch of like bear fur and like things like that. And it's like, to your point, right, about nations, like this was a highly interconnected world. Like, let's say you were in the city of Rome, you would probably go down to the market and you would be buying pepper from Sri Lanka. And the person selling it to you was probably from Sri Lanka, right? Like in this world, people were trading, people were moving. If a ship or a camel is the fastest technology that exists for you, you don't sit around thinking about, oh man, it sucks that I can't go faster than this. You think, man, I'm moving at the fastest level of technology. You
Yeah,
bum ass fools are like
yeah,
walking on your feet. You know what I
you're
mean? Like,
walking
you know what I'm
peasant.
saying?
Yeah,
Exactly. So, even the idea that like these Germanic barbarians are always like depicted like this, and it's like, no, just like the United States of America, we manufacture tons of weapons and armament more than we can actually use, and we trade that outside of our borders. Those Germans would have probably looked exactly like the Roman soldiers. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because they would have been wearing Roman weapons and armor. You know what I'm saying? So just like again, complex, making that world a little bit more complex, and just acknowledging that people have always been moving and traveling and finding new reasons to go new places.
yeah. 100% true. Did you ever watch the show Rome?
Yeah, I thought that one was pretty good.
They did a little. I'd never seen it, but it does
It's
seem
still
like as a
kind of
TV show you can do a little more, but I feel like it would have to be made now to really. They kind of have to keep making it to keep expanding it, because
for sure. Like you
the
got to
Western
iterate on it.
the Western consciousness only is going to believe so much at a time. But now we're at a
Mhm.
time where people are understanding diversity a little more, what that actually means. So the right mind could make a more complex show now.
I think so. Like even that HBO's Rome, like it's great. It's really well done. Um, but even that, still is from that same era and kind of suffers from that, like the British guys or the Romans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Because in this, Mac, what not? Yeah, Maximus
yeah,
is Spanish,
right. What's also
but
funny about
it's Russell Crowe who's Australian.
right, and what's funny about
And
that
they
is
say
that
how many times in the film, like the Spaniard, he's
the
Spanish,
Spaniard, Spaniard.
and he's like, "Hey, mate," and Russell, stop it, man. Hey, mate, I just wanna
And
anyway.
the funny thing about that though is like in this story, right? Like it's treated as almost a little exotic, right? He's Spanish. And
Right.
that's such a British idea because Marcus Aurelius and his family was a Spanish dynasty.
Mm.
The emperors had been from Spain for almost 100 years. And yes,
Wow.
they were provincials at one point, but over time, that was just part of the empire, and you were a Roman citizen.
It is funny how, yes, Spaniard is considered exotic in this movie. Um, and I'm not saying that in these historical epics, every cast member needs to be exactly
Sure,
from
sure,
the
sure.
place or anything, but it's worth noting and being aware of the differences sometimes. And we live in a world where we know who an actor is and we know who the character is, and you keep telling me he's a Spaniard, and I'm like, I know, but it's Russell Crowe at the same time.
Yeah. Should have
It's
been
not even
Antonio
necessarily.
Banderas.
It's not even. Yeah,
I
he was buzzing at this time too. 2000.
never
Yo,
thought about that before until right now. Should have
he
been
was he
Antonio.
was hot in 2000.
You know what?
Yo, what? Man, okay. I had to just
Sorry.
shake that off a little bit. Um, yeah, because well, okay. So let's talk about some things with this movie.
Sure.
Not that we haven't been, but we'll go through the movie a little bit. The plot, the plot of the movie.
Yeah.
What is this fight at the beginning of the movie? Is that like a historic fight that we
I,
know of, or is it just like kind of they were at war? There was always a war
I
type
think
of
it's
fighting.
more of that. That said, the real Marcus Aurelius, who did not live to be as old as Richard Harris was in the role, uh, and did
Who
not
did at that point?
right.
Few did.
Few did, yeah, comparatively few did. A lot of people did, but percentage wise, relatively few. Um, but he did die campaigning a war in that kind of area. They call it Vindobona. Vindobona is the Roman name for the modern town of Vienna, the city of Vienna. So that's where they're
Mm,
supposed to be. And he did die up there, but he died of plague. Smallpox broke out during the war, and that's actually how Marcus Aurelius died. So,
not
so I don't
secretly
think it's
stabbed
a
by his son.
not secretly stabbed by his son.
Now,
Uh,
Commodus was his
yeah,
son.
Commodus was his son.
Okay. And was he treacherous?
Um, Commodus is often remembered in the history as being like a tyrant, but also we have to remember that the histories were written by wealthy aristocratic senators who usually called any Roman emperor a tyrant who stepped
Like,
on their toes
just like didn't agree with what
specifically.
they wanted. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was loved by the people, it seems, and a lot of times the ones who are loved by the people, it's almost like nowadays when we talk about like making the big businesses pay their fair share.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those are the ones who are always called tyrant almost.
Yeah. Yeah. He was Bernie Sanders.
He was the Bernie Sanders of his era, though he did fight in
uh,
the arena a couple of times.
oh, wow. But in this movie, he is weak.
Yeah,
He's a coward.
he's a coward,
He is treacherous,
incestuous.
manipulative in a bad way. I guess everybody's a little manipulative, but that's for a whole different pod.
That's a different
Don't get
podcast.
me started. All communication is manipulation, but I'll save that for another time. Um,
Drop that and go.
yeah, incestuous. He wants his sister bad.
Yeah, for sure. It's like kind of a laundry list of like anything that would make a person kind of repulsive.
Yeah, they just said, "What's a bad quality?
Yeah.
Let's list like 16 of them." At some point, he'll do each one of them.
Right.
Just to be clear. And Maximus is like the best warrior.
Right.
He leads the army to victory, and he's like guiding them in. He's like, ah, men, yes, we'll ride to the morning. Like all the cliche, like
Yeah.
stoic man things. He's like, yes. Then he gives him this speech. He's like, if you ride and you're by yourself, you must be dead.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, yeah. Don't
he's
worry
like,
about it. You're already dead.
you're already dead.
And
You know,
everybody laughs.
and I'm like, he's like,
We're a bunch of
otherwise,
tough guys.
I'll see you in the morning. Some, basically stuff like that. Bunch of freaking tough guys.
Yeah.
Uh, I actually thought the early scene went on a little too long. Like they were explaining too much. I'm like, none of this is what the movie's about.
Yeah.
Because he was
True.
like, who are these men we're fighting? Nobody cares who them guys were that were they were trying to fight.
Right. Random barbarians.
Yeah. He's like, don't they know? He was like, no, they don't know. We just fight. Okay. Anyway, but it's really just like macho coding stuff, you know.
Definitely. Very macho. And I think that's what so many people who were the the folks who were like that how many times did your boyfriend think about the Roman Empire was about. I think a lot of people like Rome because it is like coded as macho. And
Yeah.
it's like, well,
Which
yeah,
is hilarious. This movie is so gay.
The Romans were so gay.
The Romans were so gay.
They were incredibly gay. And the crazy thing about the Roman Empire is that you could be the manliest of men and still have male lovers, and that was not a detractor.
Yeah, once he wins when he's a slave, the guy's like, "What do you want, woman, boy?"
Boy,
you know,
yeah.
he's like, "No, no, I don't want none of that. I don't want none of that. He's too pure." Okay,
You're right.
so
Yeah, he's too pure for sex for sure. That's another thing.
only with his beloved
His
dead wife.
beloved deceased wife. Yeah, absolutely.
Only time he can get it up was for her.
That's a good man shit.
See, even now they'd be like, "Well, we got this program AI. If you know, we can map her face onto somebody else. It's no problem if you love your dead wife. We can still help you get off." Uh,
Jeez.
so he's the biggest warrior, and
Yeah.
Commodus is just like jealous of everybody. He wants all the power because he wasn't hugged as a baby.
Yeah.
So in secret, he stabs his dad, which is a cardinal sin of manhood. You can't kill your father.
Yeah, patricide is a bad one.
Then he tells his guard, basically, he tells his guard to get Maximus out of there. That guy's a threat. My dad loved him more than me. Maximus even says, not Maximus, Aurelius even says to Maximus in private, he's like, "You should have been my son.
Yeah, you're the son I
I
should
want
have
you to lead. Yeah, you're the son I should have had. I got this loser over here.
had.
Can't even throw a baseball. Come on, man."
Right.
So Commodus does his Michael Corleone thing,
Yeah.
cleans house. You against me, if you're not with me, you against me. Any dissension, you out. Has
Yeah.
Maximus's wife and son killed, as we mentioned. Supposed to have him killed, but Maximus is like, can't kill me.
Right.
You ain't see my skills with the sword. Like by the time he
Right.
got to his wife and kid, they were already dead. So now he was too late for that. He fights his way out, but he's also like ready to die. He's like completely suicidal. He's like ready to die. But he's found by a slave trader, basically, um, and he's bought. He's bought
Hmm.
to be a gladiator, and of course, they put him in a local tournament, and he's like, "I will not fight again."
Right.
Stoic, noble. But then, of course, he does fight. So
Right.
what?
He does everything he says he won't at
Yeah,
some point in this movie.
I will not fight. It's basically like a Family Guy joke. I will not fight. Come on. All
Come
right, you
on.
got me. You got me. You got me. I'll fight. I'll fight. He fights, and then Proximo is like, "Let's put on a show for him." He's like, "Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Right.
Let's have the most bloodiest fight." So then he's such a good gladiator. He's like Allen Iverson of gladiators.
Yeah, he's immediately like,
He's the people's champ.
yeah.
This guy, people love the way he fights. He's just brutal enough. These fights. They did a great job choreographing these fights too, and
The
and
fights
shooting them
are
with
good.
multiple cameras and multiple frame rates, like
Yeah.
a masterclass in filmmaking. Like watch these like frame by frame
Yeah.
to see how a fight scene was shot. You'll be like, that's incredible. They use how many
Absolutely.
cameras? Like six. I don't know, a bunch of cameras. And then we have like basically a battle, not really a montage because it is full scenes, but it's like two major battles, kind of back to
Hmm.
back. One with chariots, one with tigers, and he's fighting one guy. And then he's fighting in front of Commodus, who travels to a place where their gladiator fights are happening. And
No, I think he's in Rome by that time.
they end up in Rome for the
They end up,
gladiator fights.
yes. I
Okay,
think only the early one
that
is
makes
in
that
this
makes
other
sense.
place.
Yeah. So Commodus makes him fight this guy Tigris, who is
His name just
you know
means tiger.
Tiger of
It's
Gaul,
literally tiger.
who is like the match. This is like your equal,
Right.
which is great for how the movie ends because like this is his toughest fight. This is a fight with the tigers too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So while they're fighting, if you haven't seen it, tigers are raised up from underneath the ground and held by ropes. And it's like the tiger actually might get you if you guys don't get each other. The tigers are like swinging at them and they're being
Yeah.
kind of pulled, so they're getting more angry. It's crazy to think about being in an arena with an animal like that.
It's another great action sequence
Yeah, definitely a cinema classic
for sure.
to think about that. And without too much CGI, it's like really feel like you're in there because those tigers were real
The tigers are
at
real.
parts. They just had to embellish them when they would get close. You
Yeah.
can't act that. You have to put the actors out of the way.
Yeah, you can't have Russell Crowe on set with a live tiger.
Wiping with a foot from his head. So he beats Man Tiger, and that's when really like all the political stuff comes ahead, right?
Mhm.
He has to show his face because they fight with masks on in this big fight. Commodus sees him and he's like, "What, bro? You? you?
Right. You still wrong?
I thought you was dead. You ain't here." So he's mad and he's got to figure it out. But Maximus is such the people's champ that he has to like give the thumbs up. This is the thumbs up thing from the movie. He's like,
Yeah.
"Don't kill him. He won the fight. You guys love him. We're gonna see him fight again."
Yeah.
Maximus tries to plan a coup. Commodus gets word of it, kills everybody, threatens his sister, demands that she give him an heir, which is that's the incestuous stuff coming to a head. Everything
For
evil
sure.
comes back to a head. He kills all the other generals and everybody. Um,
Big Michael Corleone scene.
Big Michael Corleone like montage at the end, and then it's the fight, and Commodus is like, "Oh, you thought you were gonna kill me? You thought I couldn't find out? Oh, I found out. I got spies everywhere. I got killers in the trees. So that's not how it works. You're not gonna take me over. What if I fight you?"
Right.
And Maximus is like, "I don't think you got the balls." Commodus stabs him to weaken
Yeah.
him so that he can win the fight. Fast
Still
forward,
loses.
fast forward the next day they fight. And this is what I mean. Like he already fought the toughest fighter. So the last
Yeah.
fight is just about the emotional thing.
Yeah.
So it's not really a long fight. It's not a big long climax, which I love because movies now are like the big horde fight at the end. We've already
Yeah.
had the horde fights when they had the chariot fight. We had the toughest fight with the tigers and Man Tiger. This is all
Yeah.
about the internal closure. He finally defeats Commodus, kills him, and basically the end of the movie, things are wrapped up, and the next chain of command is going to be better than Commodus was. Basically, is what you're led to believe.
Right.
And then Jaman clears the body, and he's like, because Maximus still dies from the wound.
Yeah. From the womb.
So Jaman clears the body, and he's like, "Oh, you're seeing your family now. I'll see you soon, but not too soon." Something like that.
Right. Yeah. Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah. Calling back to a line earlier in the movie.
Yeah. So it all wraps up. Um, the people's chant. People were chanting Maximus in the movie. Like this is really um, calls back to Spartacus when everybody's like, "I am Spartacus. I am
Hmm.
Spartacus." A movie worth watching if you haven't seen it. Uh, let's talk about Jamon Hansu a little bit
Sure.
and his character as like an African slave.
Yeah. I mean, he's
Who,
definitely a slave. He's a gladiator for sure.
well, do they make any mention to how his name is Juba? Any mention into his life before? I actually can't
They
remember now.
so they say he's Numidian. The Numidians were the indigenous people of, or a group, a tribe, a nation of the indigenous people from North Africa. These people still exist. They are often called Berber people. I think
Mhm.
their self
Yeah.
name is the Amazigh, is what they call themselves. But Numidians were a Amazigh people, a Berber people. Um, and many of some very important Romans, including a couple of emperors, were Berber by blood or by birth or ancestry. So
Wow.
probably not South or sub-Saharan African, like quote unquote black skinned in the way that Jaimin is, probably more of a brown skinned guy like you or me. But definitely that's really all they give about his past is they say he's Numidian, and Juba is a Numidian name. There were a number of Numidian kings who before Rome conquered that area that were named Juba.
Okay, so that's what they're hinting at, that he was a king of some sort of,
Possibly he
or
was
a very
probably
important
important.
person.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, not the only black person with a line in the movie. Not the only black person in the movie.
Definitely with lines, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. It's just interesting his placement here. I guess that's their attempt to provide some context for it and to show that this world was a little more complex, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad at it in the sense that he was also really hot at this time. This was like his peak.
Yeah, this is only a couple
Um,
years after Amistad.
Amistad. This was written by the same guy as Amistad,
Oh yeah, yeah,
Franzoni.
yeah.
Yeah,
Forgot about that.
this guy Franzoni. Uh, oh, this isn't his. I have his thing up, but that's not in the order. Let me see the order. Yeah, Amistad. I think he had a big role in this movie, Deep Rising.
I don't remember that one.
I don't remember that too well. Gladiator. He had done Stargate.
Yeah.
Actually, this was his entrance, kind of his entrance into movie. This was, yeah, he had a solid run in the '90s. Did Amistad, which was huge and should have even been bigger for him.
Yeah.
Gladiator, and then he kind of just they kind of he even talked about this in an interview recently because he was in this Gran Turismo movie. He's like,
Mm.
I've done a lot of big movies, but I never get like a lead role. I never like get a big role or even a big villain. And he
Yeah, it
talked
was.
about, how race plays into it and really him being African plays into it.
Mhm.
Because as striking as he is visually, it's almost too striking. He's almost too like chiseled in his
For
face
sure.
to be like a traditional leading American leading man in a way.
Absolutely. I would say if oh, I was wrong. I thought I was gonna recommend a movie, but actually it's not him, it's another actor. So never mind.
Dang, so we're making the same mistakes that they make.
Yeah, that they make. No, it is crazy because like there's a movie called The Four Feathers. I feel like that's maybe
Yeah, the Four Feathers,
2004. Uh
2002.
2002. Okay, so
Yeah.
almost right after this. And this is another movie where he plays like this kind of native noble savage who is only there to help the, white character fulfill his
Yeah, he kind of
mission.
gets these expository roles, like Blood
Uh-huh.
Diamond too is the same kind of thing.
Blood Diamond 2. Even his role in with a great movie, a Jim Sheridan movie called In America, is I mean, he's the downstairs neighbor, but again, it's kind of that.
Yeah. It's a shame. I would love to see him just have to carry more weight in something. And really, he's just kind of owed that at a point.
Yeah, for sure.
Or to be like a regular in a franchise, like one of the leads of if not the main guy, like at least like um one of the main guys. I was trying to think. I was gonna say like Nick Fury level, but then I felt like that was too apples to apples.
Yeah. Just a
Like he
person
was
of
in
consequence.
Furious 7. Why
Mm,
can't he be one of the
he
main people
was.
in the Furious franchise?
Absolutely.
He's only in one of
Absolutely.
them. Why wasn't he in three of them?
Yeah. That's really interesting because you're right. He kind of is owed that. He's had this really long career where he's in a lot of big movies. I mean, he's in the Marvel universe, right? Guardians of the Galaxy and a couple of the
Yeah.
other ones. Uh, I think as
And
the
he even
same
was in
recurring character.
Aquaman and Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Um and he also had a run of bad luck. And maybe I wouldn't call it bad luck, but some movies that were supposed to be franchises that kind of weren't. Like they did a King Arthur Legend of the Sword. I know that was supposed to be big, but
Oh
didn't
yeah.
quite hit. He did The Kingsman, the prequel to Kingsman.
Oh yeah.
And I think that didn't quite hit, but I think that was a victim of COVID. He did the Charlie's Angels reboot, which I think was also a COVID victim in terms of its release. He was in Shazam, and that kind of.
Yeah.
A lot of things contributed to that kind of falling, but he also ends up playing a lot of characters. Like he's the alien character, like in Guardians of the Galaxy or
Hmm.
Captain Marvel,
Hmm. Yeah,
which were yeah,
he's
which
like
those
the
were the same role,
wizard.
but like yeah, he's got some makeup on. He's green or like he's a wizard in Shazam. Yeah,
Yeah, something like that.
it's like just let him be a guy. Like in the Gran Turismo movie, he was just the father, which was a small role really because the movie he
I've been
wasn't
meaning to
like
watch that.
great sports movie.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that's really all I got to say about that. I like the actor. I want to see him in more or leading something or leading a prestige show. I think his role makes sense in the context. And it really, when I look at the movie Gladiator, I kind of take it out of historical context and just like
Mhm.
a land far, far away where these
Sure.
things happen. And that helps me believe it a little more, I guess.
Yeah, it's a fantasy movie to a certain extent for sure.
Right. Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's kind of, getting back to my love of ancient history. That's kind of what I like about ancient history is because it is so far removed that it is almost it's in the same realm as a fantasy or a sci-fi because you really have to tap into your imagination to imagine this world that is gone.
Yeah. And I think America being so young, and I think all humans and human cultures have a fascination with the ancient world,
Hmm.
however we define it. In China, they define the ancient world different
For sure.
than Western
Absolutely.
civilization. In Western civilization, we kind of take all what is considered Western history as our history.
Hmm.
If
Yeah.
it falls under a banner of Western civilization, which some Eastern things do,
Yeah.
we feel like, oh, that's just part of our history specifically. So we'll make that movie, or we'll make, we'll make the decisions on how this history is portrayed.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, so said I was a history major. I was an English minor, and so just tapping in on English, right? Like Western world literature. How many times does like the Epic of Gilgamesh get talked about as like the birth of literature? But that's like Middle Eastern. That's if anything, that's Iraq's history. Iraq should be talking about that, not
Yeah.
necessarily the United States or Britain.
I guess I wonder what I would think would be America's responsibility in telling if we want to tell these stories, you know?
Yeah,
Or should America just tell American historical stories? I mean, in a way, I guess British, and of course we adopt all British history too.
yeah, for sure.
We're saying like, oh, this is part of British history and European history, which means it's part of our history. So that makes it relevant. What do you think? I don't know if that's not really a question there. It's just like,
No, it is
should a movie like
interesting.
this be made by American by American cinema?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question, right? Because I think about this a lot because this is a topic of interest for me, and also, I write, we talk about this. So,
Yeah,
like, I do think about that question, like, what is a person's responsibility to tell a story that is not of their culture? And it's a really difficult question. I don't know that I fall on the side of like, basically stick to your own. Because even that, what is our own, is a very limited and mythologized story, right?
yeah, yeah,
And we were just talking about like American movies that do take place in American history, right? Like think of the Western movie. Um, there's almost no black people in there. When
right,
actuality, like a lot of, not most of, but a significant portion of the people going west were black because they could escape the slaveholding South. You know what I'm saying?
right.
Um, so even that is, but yeah, I do think that if we're going to engage in telling these sort of stories, we do have some responsibility. It could be casting ethnically appropriate actors. Um,
Maybe you get
it-
like a handout if you see the movie
yeah. Maybe you get
with
a,
some basic information, just like, well, this is a movie, it's entertainment. The real history is a little more complicated.
What's
Click
funny that
figure 4.1 for an illustration of. how different it was.
Well, it's funny you talked about like Spartacus, and there's something that I think is kind of missing from the movie going experience these days. But back then in the 50s and the 60s, even into the 70s, you get a movie program and they would give you a little booklet. I have a framed Enter the Dragon one because I love Bruce Lee movies. Like it's literally a booklet that they gave out when you went
Yeah.
to see the movie. And I
Now
do
you can just
think,
get a popcorn bucket, a specialized popcorn
yeah,
bucket.
awkwardly sexualized popcorn bucket for sure. Um, it's you
Which ones
didn't
was sexual?
the Dune one. There's a
Oh,
large meme
oh
database
no,
of
no. Actually, no. I remember there was a Dune bucket, but I didn't really see. I didn't. I missed the memes, I guess. Oh man,
Yeah, it was
I'm not gonna look them
fun.
up right now.
Don't please
I'll
don't.
look them up
Fun
later.
times though. Uh, but yeah, I do think if there was at least in these kind of period pieces, these costume dramas, uh, I would love something that kind of maybe delved into some of that
Yeah.
stuff, even if it was an app. You know what I mean? Download this app and read.
Well, you know what? And then I wonder about the other side of it, and I think we can. But like, what if we made a Gladiator
Hmm.
and everybody was black? Different shades of blackness, sure, but everybody was black.
I mean, I think that's probably should be Gladiator too.
I mean, Denzel is like the lead selling point of Gladiator too. I don't know, he's not the lead character, but all the
and
posters
he
are of Denzel. But
and he plays a real life character, Macrinus, and Macrinus
well,
was
you know how
yeah,
they stage Shakespeare, right? And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
they're doing all black.
yeah,
Maybe not so much now, but they definitely have to do like an all black Hamlet.
for sure. Denzel's been a part of some of those.
And also with like Shakespeare specifically, I'm sure there are all Asian productions
Yeah.
from
Mm,
anything from of any of his major plays that are constantly made into stage shows, right? All Asian, all
yeah.
Arab, all Hispanic, and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. And then you look at Hamilton, something like that, which recast the founding fathers, and that it gets made fun of now, I think, but that was something I think important.
Yeah, it was significant for sure.
It was definitely significant. I mean, it shook up the world for sure when it happened.
Absolutely.
And I even think now, like, there have been some copycat. I don't really mean to deride them or call them copycats, but other works that have taken a similar approach in casting very diverse cast, but doesn't quite scratch the itch to me of
Hmm.
like writing the wrong. But I don't know if a version that was as historically accurate as possible does it either. And I think, like I said, this is a beloved movie. It's
Yeah.
solid storytelling and great filmmaking from the
Hmm.
standpoint of like all the crafts and all the craft people, all the trades, the editing, sound, costume, like all of that is great. So it's like, is there a place to just make a great movie without regard the way white people have in the past? Is there a place for that? And does it matter? Like if you or I, or like if Antoine Fuqua was like, I'm going to tell
Hmm.
Caesar, Julius Caesar, I'm going to tell that story, or the play. And
Hmm.
they're like, okay, well, who's going to be Caesar? Who's going to be Caesar? And he was like, Mahershala Ali. Oh man,
I'd go see
great,
it.
great. And like, well, who's gonna be what, Claudius or whoever, right? And he's like, oh, Jake Gyllenhaal. You know what I mean? And it was like, I just got the top actors who I like, who wanted to do it,
Yeah.
and I didn't think about their race at all. It's
Hmm.
just these dudes. Like who's Brutus? Who's Brutus? Brutus is Laverne Cox. Say
Straight
something.
up.
That's who it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
And would that fly? And maybe that's too much of a story now. Too much of it would be like, oh, they did a multiracial casting. The media is gonna make a big deal out of it. but maybe that's just the best choices for the role of the movie he wanted to make and the people that he had contact of.
Yeah. I think that it's possible. I do think that, especially in today's social climate, it's going to be a big story. And I think it also goes back to that thing that you said before about like you almost have to do it incrementally. Audiences are so used to this visual language of this
Yeah,
mythologized past that's almost like suspension of disbelief to just imagine that there were, maybe Black or Asian or Middle Eastern people in a place where they definitely lived, and you know what I mean.
yeah.
Um, but I would love to see things like that. I think there are probably a few productions like
Well, they
that, and I
did a
know the
they're doing
British do a lot.
a Romeo and Juliet, I think in London, maybe
Mm,
with Spider-Man,
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland, and Juliet is a black girl,
Mm,
a black theater girl who I hadn't
mhm.
heard of, but who's big in theater. And of course, people come out and say all kind of racist stuff online and comment on it in that way. She's gotten great reviews
Yeah.
at the same time. And I don't know the other cast makeup. I don't know if they made the families, like his family's white, her family's black. I actually don't know if they did that or not. Or really, I don't know anything else about the play except Romeo's white, Juliet's black this time. But so people are always pushing on somewhere in the world, somewhere on some production, but who knows what the right, if there's a right answer, if there is even a right answer.
Yeah, and I do think I was saying, and I think your example lays it out even better. I do feel like British productions do this a little bit more, where you just kind of get the best actor despite whatever the race is, and I wonder how much that theater going culture over there, which has been seeing like these mixed race casts in theater
Yeah,
for a while, allows that to like transfer into TV and film. Um, but yeah, I think it would be great. And especially on these things, right? These things that Shakespeare or history, these things that kind of are open for reinterpretation again and again, kind of these public domain ideas, right?
yeah,
Do
right,
a
right,
Bram Stoker's Dracula every single year, and it could be an Arab guy this time, a black guy that time. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
why not?
yeah. Something to think about. Something to think about. We don't have the
Something to
answer.
think about.
Do you have a quick casting? We really got four characters. One's a kid, so three characters. If we want to think about who we might recast, you can do a
Sure,
2000 version or a now version, and think
sure.
about that's going to help you maybe sell the film.
Okay. Yeah, I got a couple, and then I can think of the others on the fly.
Okay, just do Maximus first.
Okay.
I'm gonna do a couple. I'm gonna do a 2000 and a now. I think
Ooh, interesting.
for Maximus, I'm gonna go. If we're doing it 2000, I'm gonna put Jamon in the lead role.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh
I'm
yeah.
gonna make him Maximus instead of Juba. You
Yeah,
know, yeah. So that's my 2000 Maximus.
for sure.
Who you got?
I'm gonna go today, and I'm gonna go John Boyega.
How old was Russell Crowe when this movie was done? He was born in '64, so he was like late 30s. Okay.
I think Boyega's like 35, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. It wasn't even. I was trying to think of who I might
Oh, okay, gotcha.
go now. I'm gonna go Cyborg.
Oh, yeah, can't remember his name, but yes,
Ray
Ray. Yeah, Ray something. Bummer,
Ray
bummer.
let me see. Cyborg actor. Snyder? Because now it's giving me 30,000 cyborgs from every cartoon. Ray
For
Fisher.
sure. Ray Fisher, yes.
Ray Fisher. Okay. Who did you say? Oh yeah, Boyega.
Boyega, for sure.
Yeah, he's I like Boyega, man. He was great in Woman King, which was a period piece
Yeah.
in a similar sense. What about Commodus? Commodus.
I'm gonna go Kaluuya, Daniel Kaluuya.
In 2000, I'm gonna go Chris Tucker. fresh off of fifth Element, right before Rush Hour.
Yes.
I got stuck here. 2024, I'm gonna go I want to say Jermaine Fowler from his off of his performance in The Blackening. I don't know if you saw that horror
Yeah,
movie
I
he did
did.
over the summer. Yeah.
I
Off of
did.
his
Yeah.
performance in The Blackening. I was really impressed by the range of that. It was such a weird character. I'm gonna go Jermaine Fowler. And then the sister, who was played by Connie Nielsen, who maybe didn't become a big movie star, but has been steady working. She's a
Oh, steady
working
working. Yeah.
actress, like great filmography. Apparently, she's in Gladiator too.
Yeah. I watched the trailer again after I finished the movie. And she is. She still is in that one.
Great. She's done a lot of TV. Who would you put for her?
Yeah. I think I'm gonna go Zazie Beats. No, no, no. I'm sorry. Tiana Paris.
Oh, great. Yeah. 2000s, I'm gonna go. Who was hot in 2000s?
I
Who was
mean,
still like
Regina?
King or Hall? They were both good.
Either or
Yeah.
they're both good. They're both on top. Or
No, I'm gonna go with
hmm, it's a great question. Hallie?
I'm gonna go Rosario.
Rosario. Good choice. Good choice.
Yeah, she was really hot. The 25th Hour, she was hot then.
Yeah, for
He
sure.
Got
For sure.
Game,
Definitely. Only a couple years before that.
the Kevin Smith joints. She did. That was like
Yeah,
the period where she was most active.
for sure. For
And
sure.
then she did Alex. Was she in Alexander? No, that was Angelina Jolie.
No, she was in Alexander. She played his
She was in
wife.
Alexander. Yeah,
Jolie
so
was
she
his
wasn't.
mother.
Okay, they were both. Whoa, whew,
Killer.
steaming movie, steaming movie.
And I thought about that movie while watching this because this movie did kick off a little mini run on Sword and Sandal movies.
Yeah,
Not
we
a
got like
ton,
yeah,
but it was a couple.
we had a few. And then for now, I would say who did I cast as? Oh, Ray Fisher. Okay, I'm gonna go. I don't even know. I'm trying to think age wise. Huh, tough one.
I do think there's kind of less folks in that like mid 30s range nowadays, just in general. Like I feel like a lot of
Or
actors
like
are younger or older than
kind of like a lot of opportunities just aren't there, and like
that. Right, right, right.
we lost kind of like black outlets.
Mm,
You
very
know,
true.
like you could make a
Very true.
black movie in the '90s, and we would
Hmm.
know a few more actresses, and we had our own like sitcoms and stuff, right? Like
Right,
UPN, things like that, WB,
right. Or
where
Fox in general.
early Fox, you know. So, but now, you know, they've slowly kind of, oh, if a black thing isn't for everybody, then it's not, you know, it's not for anybody, you
Yeah,
know,
there's for sure a loss of like the black niche film.
black niche, yeah,
You know what I mean?
and
The only
and of
niche films that are left are like kind of white independent movies.
and of like the outlet for it, you
Yeah.
know. BET has never quite been that. But they have new programs now and stuff, you know.
Hmm.
But I guess in that terms of the outlet, it's like major networks used to carve out a space
Yeah, that's true.
for black stuff, you know, and they don't do that anymore. I'm gonna go Emayatsi,
Mm.
Coronaldi. Sorry, I know I butchered her name, but she's on the TV show Reasonable Doubt.
Mm. Hmm.
I think she's a great actress. So I saw her in Middle of Nowhere back a decade ago. I thought she was fantastic in that.
Okay.
She's been in a few shows. Yeah. And she's leading the show Reasonable Doubt now, which is on Hulu, I believe, through the
Okay.
Onyx Collective, who made the show. So sorry I butchered the name. Emayatsi Coronaldi. Mazzi Corinaldi. I'm looking at the phonetic spelling Wikipedia. Yeah, so great casting. A movie that is part of the cinema lexicon. So in that way, I would say it's
Definitely.
worth seeing just to like educate yourself on like cinema history. And if you're a filmmaker, it's a great film from one of the masters, Ridley Scott.
For
So
sure.
you can learn a lot
I,
about filmmaking by studying a film like this.
I think a lot of scenes, a lot of shots from this film have either been referenced or replicated in a lot of things
For sure.
since.
For
You know what I
sure.
mean? So it's kind of not foundational, but definitely foundational to building kind of like that, like you said, that good kind of film language knowledge.
Yeah. It's like you got to watch those old grainy clips of Wilt Chamberlain, to understand.
Right.
Because you got
Right.
to watch like little Gladiator, a little, it's one of those early 2000s movies that also defines the era without being about the era.
Hmm. For sure.
All right. We'll see what we're
Yeah.
going to do next. This was fun though.
No, super fun. Thank you for the opportunity when Gladiator 2 came out. I was like, well, why not the first Gladiator? I haven't seen it in a while, and obviously a topic of my uh just a topic I'm a big
Yeah.
fan
We,
of, so
we,
appreciate
we
it.
could even have gone even more into the history, but
Yeah, I'm glad you
some,
kept me on topic because I can ramble about it for
well, what really happened is we started a little late and I noticed my battery is going down. So I wanted to make sure we got to an ending without having to cut you off. But I know we could have gone much deeper into Roman history, and we'll do more period pieces. There's got to be something else that we can do at some point to
For
to
sure.
circle back.
Yeah, that'd be cool.